Hello again, YouTubers, on with SpongeBob 101 back here again on the SpongeBob channel with our review of SpongeBob episode 287, Friendiversary and Mandatory Music. The synopsis states, SpongeBob celebrates the anniversary of his friendship with Squidward. Squidward does not. Also, Squidward's lack of talent lands him in a court-ordered music class. Without further ado, let's dive right in. Starting off with Friendiversary. The first time I watched it, I thought it was Dying for Pie Round 2. It even has some elements from that Season 2 episode. The episode starts off with Squidward being awoken in the middle of the night, and he thinks there is a break-in, only to then be surprised by SpongeBob, who states that it is the anniversary of the day SpongeBob became friends with Squidward. So this is then followed up by a look at SpongeBob's scrapbook, featuring very iconic moments like SpongeBob meeting Counselor Squidward at camp, the time SpongeBob moved in Truth or Square, and even SpongeBob winning yet another Employee of the Month award from, well, Employee of the Month. SpongeBob is booted out, but then in the morning, he starts pestering Squidward in really silly ways, from playing a piano that drops onto Squidward to attaching jet-powered roller skates to Squidward in order to, quote, create more memories. Even at the Krusty Krab, Squidward notices SpongeBob in his magazine feature of Kelpie G. I did really like the various art styles used following this. We had a Kelp Soda advertisement, an old-timey cartoon, and even some doodles. Nonetheless, by nightfall, Squidward is filled with trauma and paranoia. To solve this, he comes up with a diabolical situation: erase himself from SpongeBob's scrapbook and brain, and he actually is successful at doing so. So this leads into a strange situation where the next day, aside from seeing the female eel from so long ago, we have Squidward encountering a SpongeBob who truly thinks that Squidward is a new employee at the Krusty Krab. Of course, Squidward is elated, but this attracts Krabs' attention, and when Squidward reveals what he did, Krabs goes absolutely berserk. It turns out that Krabs had given SpongeBob the combination to the safe containing the Krabby Patty formula, and SpongeBob, not wanting to forget it, attached it to a memory of himself with Squidward. Like, how is Squidward supposed to foreshadow that anyway? Nice plot twist nonetheless. Krabs orders Squidward to go and recreate those memories with SpongeBob in order to, well, make SpongeBob remember Squidward, and so we get a replay of the previous nonsensical scenes, followed by rehashes of moments from classic episodes such as Squidward attracting the sea bear from the camping episode, a salmon suit from Dying for Pie, and even Squidward blowing the giant bubble that traps him within from Bubble Stand. We also got the Lima Beans car chase referenced in Fools in April, and the Sushi Maker obstacle course from Life Insurance. A lot of nostalgic fan service here, and I really appreciate it. I can't mention every past reference featured, but this episode was truly jam-packed with them. And it does make sense since SpongeBob is, well, celebrating past memories of Squidward, right? So eventually SpongeBob does remember who Squidward is and shakes the diving board letter ferociously in joy, only to send Squidward plummeting down into the vat of lava and through the entire Sushi Maker course. Well, they didn't forget about Squidward pain for sure. The episode ends rather abruptly with SpongeBob revealing that he had mistaken the date of the true Friendiversary, and it was time to celebrate the Friendiversary for real this time. Man, SpongeBob really needs to learn to give it a rest. I did enjoy the plot of this episode a lot, especially because of all the past references, which were really more of an essential element rather than, feeling forced. And putting that nostalgia in a package like this was just great. Squidward freaking out after a barrage of SpongeBob annoyance is quite typical, but for once he should have really lightened up. Imagine if that happened genuinely. I guess Squidward would be too out of character, but one can hope. Plot gets 9 out of 10. Animation gets 9 out of 10 as well. Absolutely fantastic work throughout the episode with all the little details, new and old. Specifically on the new stuff, I thought the Krabs-Squidward confrontation was epic, but also portraying SpongeBob and Squidward in different art styles ranging from paintings to magazine photos, old-timey cartoon, and more were a joy to see. Unique characteristics gets 8 out of 10. I'd say this might be one of the pinnacles in the SpongeBob and Squidward friendship, and the setting of the Friendiversary was definitely not an often occurrence. I can only recall The Gift of Gum as being a Friendiversary style episode, but that didn't carry the pomp as did this episode. Of course, this episode probably wouldn't end up as being iconic as some like Dying for Pie, but it sure was a nice celebratory themed episode with a silly twist. Overall, Friendiversary gets 26 out of 30 from me. Now moving on to mandatory music, this was pretty much one of the first times Squidward actually gets into legal trouble specifically because of his terrible clarinet skills, not doing anything else. I've left to wonder if Squidward will ever be good at the clarinet, but anyways, it begins with Squidward serenading the crowd at Bikini Bottom Park, only to drive them nuts with the terrible sound of his clarinet. So he first gets thrown out, literally, out of the park, and then proceeds to blast his music throughout Bikini Bottom, turning the city into a wreck, somehow. This is when he is confronted by the music police, actually arrested for recklessly playing of a reed instrument, and then brought straight to the Little Flipper Music Academy for, quote, mandatory music re-education. Talk about demeaning Squidward, right? It's a music school for kids, and in true SpongeBob fashion, you know SpongeBob just has to show up sooner or later to make Squidward feel even more miserable. A side note, I thought it was kind of interesting how they basically locked up and restrained not Squidward, but Squidward's clarinet, perhaps suggesting that it is a clarinet that's really the problem and not Squidward after all. I mean, it's up to interpretation. Anyways, the teacher, Mr. Sturgeon, starts off with asking her students, which are all kids by the way, aside from SpongeBob and Squidward, to demonstrate their musical skills using an instrument of their choice, and it doesn't go too well. SpongeBob does immediately impress everyone with his awesome nose flute, while Squidward, well, I would be surprised if he didn't produce that horrible noise with his clarinet. I really like the little girl putting the tuba over her head though, just to shield herself from Squidward's noise. That was a good one. Mrs. Sturgeon quickly removes the clarinet from Squidward's possession and offers him several other instruments to play, including a harmonica, a flute, and even the broom, all of which backfire on Squidward and once again demonstrate his lack of musical talent. While that's all going on, we have a great musical performance started by SpongeBob, and gradually all the kids suddenly chime in and are able to play along. Squidward has had enough though, and after being doused with a fire extinguisher, he seizes the clarinet from its restraints and starts disrupting the performance, creating a noise tornado that sucks up SpongeBob and everyone else in the room and dumps them outside the academy. So Mrs. Sturgeon activates the music alarm, and then we have a confrontation with the music police and Squidward. In a dramatic turn of events, the coppers send in, quote, the maestro, which is essentially a robot that can silence instruments by launching a cork towards them, and that's really quite creative, I gotta say. Squidward eventually gets caught, and his clarinet is sent into the wood chipper, so that's a very sad end for it. SpongeBob attempts to comfort Squidward and gives him a napkin to sneeze in, and he does, creating a sound that begins Squidward's new act, playing his nose flute. So Squidward is named the most improved student, and the episode closes with Squidward playing his nose flute along with a dose of squid ink raining down onto the audience in the park. A happy ending indeed. Plot gets 9 out of 10 from me. I thought the focus on Squidward's less than great musical capacity always deserved a more thorough look, and we definitely got that in this episode, even having him get court ordered to attend a kids musical academy, which is certainly silly but quite funny at the same time. Looks like Squidward has been far removed from his time as an imposter music teacher from way back in Professor Squidward. Animation gets 8 out of 10. Squidward, being the core character in this episode, gets the bulk of the great scenes, ranging from a close-up with his very grumpy face to failing to play musical instruments and even creating a noise tornado. Then again, SpongeBob's band was pretty epic too. Just imagine if Squidward managed to play along with them. Unique characteristics gets 8 out of 10. While Squidward can't catch a break most of the time, this episode really demonstrates his struggle with his own ego and his search for musical stardom. It was great to see a happy ending with his nose flute, so I guess, he didn't really need to look that far and wide after all to find his specialty. And while we're familiar with SpongeBob's nose flute, Squidward being great at his own nose flute was certainly a shakeup I wasn't expecting. Overall, mandatory music gets 25 out of 30 from me. So that's all for our review of these two episodes. Let me know in the comments box below what you guys thought about them, and make sure to subscribe, like. I'll see you guys again in the next SpongeBob video coming real soon. Till then, see you later. Bye!